Rich, today we're sitting down with my good friend and founder of Evolving Athletes, Vince Malts. I'd love to hear what you took from this conversation.
Yeah, his whole idea around life development through sports, that combination of words, I think, is very profound. And anyone who's been in sports, I'm sure, can relate to it.
Yeah, in this conversation, we really talk about the difference between mindset performance and mental performance, the recipe and how you should digest different recipes for success. And most specifically, when we get down to it at the end of the day, the awareness of your position is the key to your mobility. Let's find out what that means. Here's Coach Vinny. This episode is being brought to you by IOI Ventures. We all know that digital marketing is vital to our company's growth. Unfortunately, many of us entrepreneurs don't know where to start. We simply feel overwhelmed by acronyms like CTA, CRM, and GA. It's time for all of us to stop feeling stuck because our partners at IOI Ventures have the experience and track record to get us moving in the right direction. Want to learn more? Go to ioiventures.com/EU and sign up for your free 30-minute consultation. Vince, welcome to the Entrepreneurs United podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you guys for having me. This is fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive into you, your career, where you've gone, but more specifically what you're doing today. And certainly have been a personal witness to everything you've done over the years and you to mine. So it's just great to have you on this podcast, be able to talk through some of that and just really reflect a little bit on where things have come and where things are going, quite frankly. So if you don't mind, why don't we start off with give the audience a quick history of your past, and then we'll jump into where you are today. But give us a quick history of your past, developing as a professional athlete and student and everything else.
Yeah. It's always funny, this part of, okay, what's your past and diving in. But all right, I'm going to try to keep a nice, short, sweet, to the point. Grew up in Philadelphia, first generation Ukrainian, Jewish American, I guess we will. And so it was interesting growing up. Grew up in Philadelphia, born and raised and all that. So it was interesting growing up where my parents were very young when they had me, 17 and 16, which is pretty wild. So coming up, grew up in the Philadelphia area. Parents put me into this Orthodox Jewish school initially, which was wild to grow up in. At night, I'd be coming home playing hockey, or I'd be out on the street figuring life out on my own kind of thing. And so it was a really interesting upbringing, because then with the family, it's a Ukrainian family, but Russian speaking. So you put it together. But it's so many different cultures, right? There's the street part, there's the religious part, there's the Russian, Ukrainian part. So there was just like a lot of different cultures that grew up around. And then obviously the hockey culture, which was a big influence for me in shaping and molding discipline and my passion, right? At the time as growing up was finding my passion. So through the younger years, then eventually was able to get an opportunity through playing hockey, as playing high level hockey, all this stuff, and eventually end up getting drafted into the NHL by Vancouver Canucks, start playing in the minors. I unfortunately ended up, after I got drafted, I go through an injury. And so then I start playing in the minors. I played about 10 years professionally, trying to find my way back and all of that. So learned a lot through that ordeal and all that fun stuff. And then got into coaching. And so that's where the entrepreneurial thing kicked in, where started my own company called Evolving Athletes. And then also coaching at the same time, like anybody who knows in athletics, if you're coaching, you have your business along with the coaching that you have to do for the organizations. So I rode that for about 10 years. And then once I got into that field and finding my way and my company versus coaching and finding that passion inside of that, eventually led me into mindset performance about 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now, which is wild to think. And so then got into mindset performance. It was basically almost like a healing of sorts for me at the time. I was going from my playing days to coaching and I'm trying to figure out life and what do I want to do next, and found mindset performance really changed my perspective on life in a lot of ways. And then basically realized the importance of it in being able to help athletes out. And that's really where the start of the entrepreneurial all-in journey began, where it's, okay, we're going to now do our thing, and we're going to jump in on this. And so started that about 11 years ago. And ever since then, just been navigating in and out. It's some cool opportunities along the way. I became first mindset performance coach in the NHL, which was pretty crazy, as John, and just different opportunities, being able to work with different colleges, being able to work with you guys on different parts. So it's just been a crazy adventure that ever since getting into the entrepreneurial and going all in, of all these different navigations and all these different kind of experiences that have led to now It's been pretty wild and crazy, but here we are.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And I mean, Rich, if you want to take a break for the next 45 minutes, I could just ask I could ask Vince one question. I could ask him, you said when you got into mindset performance, it changed your perspective of life. I could just ask that question. We could just stop right here and just let Vince go because there's a lot to unpack in that, I'm sure. But I'm not going to do that just yet. We'll break it down into small pieces.
True.
Vince, I want to just take it, in a step here. First is the culture piece.
Yeah.
And all the different cultures, whether it be the Ukrainian, the Russian language, the Jewish Orthodox school, all these different cultures, and you look at what's going on today and just the culture clashes that are going on everywhere. And I know you well enough to know that you're a love first, love everybody type of person. I'd just like to get your thoughts on that because not as many people have touched so many different cultures in so many different areas that are currently being impacted. Can you share maybe your thoughts or feelings or emotions on just the state of the cultural wars that are going on?
Yeah, 100%. It's at the end of the day, it's fear based, right? If you don't know somebody, it's automatic. It's like one of those things of just you fear them. We all fear the unknown. It's an unconscious, it's a part of our nature, right? Biological nature of through evolution, you survive. And in order to survive, it was based off of being scared. And, the irony then is you came together. The way we did survive and thrive was coming together as a community with other human beings through evolution, realizing, oh, it's good if we stay together. But through that, you can see culturally that I like to always look at it as what ends up getting created and siloed by the human mindset is that we pick teams. We're on a certain team from an athletic lens. We all know. We all scream for our team and we all love to talk crap to each other about whose team is better and all this fun stuff, right? And so culturally, there's this segmentation that happens naturally, whether in sport, your own team, whether politically, right? You have your own, okay, I'm picking this team over here, religion, I'm picking this team over here, right? There's always these silos, right? And these categorizations, which again, human mindset is very easy for us to want that because it takes down that fear part of us, right? Because we feel like we know something, right? If I'm a part of something and I have an identity to a certain group, then now I feel like I'm a part of something. And that fear comes, dwindling down because of that. And so I think that's a big part of what the cultural aspect to this whole process is that we don't really truly understand all the nuances that go into these different cultures. The funny part about it is we're all similar in nature for the most part of the good and bad. I always think of Star Wars of good and evil and all that stuff. I genuinely believe at the end of the day, when we can sit together and we know each other, most people are good in that way, right? We find common ground. The problem is, and we all know in today's world with social media and all that, is that this separation that comes in, these identities that come in, I don't know you, you don't know me. Now we add layers of, oh, you've got these weird things that you do in your culture. I don't do that. You do that. That's strange. You've got this weird food that smells different. And it's because of that unknown and we don't know each other. It's easy to be like, oh, I don't know that. So I'm going to fear you or I'm going to hate you or I'm going to dislike you. And I think that's what contributes so much to it is that as a culture and then society, education, all that, we don't teach to that. We don't teach people to understand there are going to be things you don't know, but what are you doing personally to know that better? Do you care to know that better? Is that a part of your culture? Have you been influenced by your upbringing, the people around you that lead you, right? To think about that idea. And again, you start to spin the wheel, right? Of as much as we know that's a good thing to do,
Yep.
how much does leadership genuinely believe in teaching that, in understanding what that truly means as a human being to navigate through that as a leader? Because that's at the end of the day what it comes down to, right? Is that the leadership, do you understand it in such a context where you can put your own stuff aside and you can actually open up your mind to understanding all the nuances and intricacies and be a human being that just knows how to just be good in that way and understand everyone's different and try to truly understand somebody else.
Yep.
And that's super challenging for a human being.
Yeah, no doubt. Thanks for sharing all that. There's just so much going on there, and I want to unpack even a few other things you threw out there. But bring me back to yourself. You're growing up, become a hockey player, and inevitably that ends, right? Professional athletes, it ends, and then you got to figure out what you're going to do next, and then you find a career, and the career was like, I'm going to stay in sports, but I'm going to coach others. And inevitably, that somewhat came to an end. Although you love coaching, you decided to then take an entrepreneurial path. Can you walk me through that pivot? Obviously, the transitioning from a professional athlete to another career, you don't have to walk me through that. That happens to all professional athletes at some point. But you start coaching, and then you realize, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe there's something more for me. And you discover an entrepreneurial landscape, and then you discover mindset performance. You've made a couple of transition shifts. Talk to me about those shifts. Why were those so important to you? And how did you discover them?
Yeah. So it's funny, right? Just through experience, right? I guess the first phase was going from the playing days into, all right, I need to find a career. I need to do something else. And so naturally, I found and discovered coaching in probably my early 20s, where I was doing a camp and the director of the camp said, here, why don't you run the session? And it was like about 50 kids on the ice. And so I ran the session, and it was my first experience where I realized, wow, I have this natural thing towards teaching because it was very natural, easy to go out there and do. So that was the first inclination of, okay, this thing called coaching, I've got this natural thing towards it. So, like any human being, wow, I'm pretty good at it. Cool, let's go explore this energy and see what it's all about. And so that's how then eventually I start to realize, okay, I want to start my own company. And we have Evolving Athletes. And the idea with Evolving Athletes initially came from just seeing the need of life skill development through sport. And a lot of us talk about it and we know how important it is, but it was really something that drove inside of me that at the time I wasn't great at yet, but I was learning and understanding and seeing that's really what was drawing me in was the old hockey, life is going to be there forever, hockey isn't type of thing. And yeah, I just started to realize through that lens of the importance of how can I actually teach the life lesson through sport. And so that was a big driver for me in terms of once I got into coaching and you start coaching other teams, and it's the old, hey, you can bring your company with, but we need you to coach as well. And so what I learned through that journey was as I was coaching, the different types of leaders, the owners that I dealt with, the different directors that I dealt with. And when we talk about the life skill component and you're the leaders and you're running the ship, there was always this kind of like friction, right? In my youth, obviously very aggressive and John of how it was hard for me to analyze and understand from a leadership standpoint of and how to articulate that. I understand you as a leader that it's challenging for you, it's stressful for you, but I would look at it as, well, I'm right and you're wrong kind of lens. And this isn't right what you're doing. And this doesn't help players or families. So I was very judgmental in that way based off of what I was seeing. And so I think that's where the next component of, all right, I'm tired of working in these cultures that I just see from a leadership standpoint. And we talk about that all in factor of you're getting a part of me that I just know at the end of the day, you're not getting all of me. And the reason being is I'm being influenced, I'm watching, I'm learning from what you're doing, but this just isn't a fit. And so that's where then eventually when started off and decided to go with the mindset piece, it was like, we're going to go all in on our thing. And this is the first time that actually, you know what, none of the coaching, nothing else, just let's do our thing. And came to that realization where I just had enough. It was funny, right? There was this kind of evolution that ended up happening. And John, we had a couple of weeks ago, right? I explained to your team where phase one of getting fired, going through these situations and working for these organizations, phase one was just, oh my God, devastation. Just like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened. Phase two, then you go through, and phase two is wait, confusion. Wait, what just happened? Why did I get fired? Oh, this doesn't make sense. Like, what just went down? Phase three, when I got fired, it was just had a child, got a house, moved, and it was like instantaneously, like, we're moving on. Let's go. What's the solution? And that's how I got into the mindset part was there was no emotion to it. It was just, I had finally hit a stage where I'm like, I'm ready to bet on myself. I'm ready to go all in on, all right, I can do this. Our family can do it. Like, we can do this. And that was the first time that I felt that, where that fear released of, I don't need somebody else in this context. I'm down to go on my own. And I think that's where when that happened and I had that realization, that's where the true entrepreneurial piece kicked in and realized, okay, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And since then, as the evolution continues on and we're still navigating, but that was the moment definitely where it was like, enough's enough. Stop thinking I need somebody else it's time to bet on myself. And that was a really powerful moment for me in the evolution of this process.
Mindset performance, I don't hear those two words going together very often. I'm not even sure I've ever heard of them going together. I understand what they mean. I think it's brilliantly put together. Did you put those together, or where did you get that combination of two words? Did you read a book? Did you have a coach? Where'd you get mindset performance from?
Yeah, yeah. So I had awesome mentors. Brian Grasso and Carrie Campbell actually started. So back then it was the free thinking renegades kind of thing. And that was where I initially went through the mindset process. And then they eventually evolved into Mindset Performance Institute. So I had done this program, it was about a year and a half, and we would always talk about mindset performance. That was basically the core of it. And so at the time, as we were doing mindset performance, it just always stuck. It was just like, yeah, that's what we do is mindset performance. And so that was the initial phase of the influence and just realizing, yeah, I like this. And it just made sense too with how I interpreted mindset and what it meant in terms of performance. So it just stuck and went with it.
Yeah, I love it. You mentioned in your answer something about you going through the mindset process. What were you referencing there? What's the mindset process?
Yeah. So my interpretation of mindset, when I look at it, is think of it like a recipe, right? It's a chef. And there's different ingredients that you're searching for that are simple, high quality ingredients that matter for your life. What's the nature of how your brain interprets information? What's the nature of you physically as a human being? Who are you? So it's understanding what key ingredients, maybe 3 to 5 different parts of your process that you've come to realize for yourself, how to synergize those like a chef, how to put them together and just make them taste tasty together. Right. And so and then I take it down so many different roads, but that's really at the core of my interpretation with mindset performance is that you're synergizing key ingredients that you have to find for yourself. This isn't something that somebody else can tell you. I think a big misconception is that where we make that little bit of a difference between mental performance and mindset performances. Mental performance is your typical visualization, goal setting, right? Things of that breathing, things of that nature. So they're the tools that you're taught on how to be able to utilize mental performance in your process. Where mindset is, it's going down the rabbit hole of knowing, okay, what do I notice is my nature? Who am I? Let me get to the core of that. What do I truly want? And then it's going and discovering, okay, what's non-negotiable in my process of well, what does that exactly mean to me personally? And I have to go do the work and go find that out of my taste buds. There's a certain kind of thing that I enjoy. Do I know how to go find that? How to go find those unique ingredients and raise the quality of those ingredients for myself, not on someone else's interpretation, but for myself. And so when you learn that skill, it changes your confidence, your belief system, because you're doing the work for yourself and finding that. So it's that combination of just what am I putting together that's synergizing together and just feels right for me as a human being.
I like your analogy over to cooking and finding simple ingredients. I want to run with that analogy. Can you give me an example of what are some ingredients? Like I'm having a hard time getting my mind wrapped around what is he talking about? The
Yeah.
simple ingredients, like what would be an option list? If I open my cupboard, I'd go, wow, we have cinnamon, we have cumin, we have pepper, we have white pepper. What's in the cupboard for mindset ingredients?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Think of it as when you look at theories or concepts. Anybody who's listening can understand in school you might learn these, and it's a combination of different parts. For us, the interpretation is the initial mindset method, which is what we basically go off of. So the mindset method recipe. So we talk about become self-aware, identify strengths and challenges, simplify my game, create my vision, experience my values. So those are 5 key ingredients. And then what we do is we help you understand what do you mean by that. So becoming self-aware. You go down the rabbit hole and you understand physical, mental, and emotional self-awareness. So physically, what do you understand about your capabilities, right? What can you actually, what's your competency of as an athlete or entrepreneur? What do you actually physically know about your capacity? What are you capable of? Then mentally, it's your decision making, your thought process. What do you know about how you interpret information, how you make choices, decisions, right? Psychologically, how do you work through your process and what do you recognize about how your mind interprets information? And then the emotional might be, all right, how do you react? What are things that might trigger you, or what are things that excite you? Things of that nature, right? So it gives you an idea of off that recipe, right? When we talk about the 5 different ingredients, but then inside of that, when we talk about becoming self-aware, now there's another ingredient that goes in there. So think of it as when you go to a restaurant, right? And you go in, you're going to the restaurant, and well, we're going to have a 5 course meal. And so there's going to come out the appetizer and each segment, right? And the main meal, then the dessert and all that. So life is the kind of like the same way of when we interpret and we talk about the mindset method recipe, and you go down that and you find out what each one ingredient means, then you go inside of each one of those ingredients and you find the interpretation specifically towards your specific needs. And so there's always a framework that's built around it. So it's always looking at things in combinations, right? It's not just one idea that's in there. It's multiple layers of ideas or ingredients that synergize together. And so that's really what you're searching for, is for you personally, right? And that might be something as an entrepreneur, you figuring out, all right, what am I good at? Maybe it's sales that I'm really good at. And so I start to look at, all right, well, if I'm really good at sales, what else can I do to improve that part of my process? Do I need to do something else? So do I need to go take some classes and get a mentor to be able to do that? Do I want to go practice sales in different variations to see how much I can push that limit? Is there a certain part of sales that really excites me and ignites me that I understand? Is there a certain part of sales that I don't like? So you go inside of these different parts and you start to use the frameworks to understand how you interpret it, and then how are you personally experiencing whatever it is inside of that recipe. And the more information you get from those experiences, the easier and easier it is to keep replicating and developing your own unique recipe through the process. That's basically the idea and the concept behind utilizing these different frameworks, recipes, theories, things of that nature.
Can you break down those 5 again on the mindset method? I got self-aware. What are the other 4 again?
Yeah, so become self-aware, identify strengths and challenges, simplify my game, create my vision, and then experience my values.
Okay. Thank you. You were the first mindset performance coach in the NHL. That is cool.
Yeah.
How did you sell that? Because if you were the first, then it wasn't a thing. You couldn't come in and say, hey, I'm a mindset performance coach and I'm the best mindset performance coach, and here's why you want to hire me. You couldn't do that. It wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
How did you sell what you were doing to make your way to be the first at it?
Yeah, so great question. So the big part was I got an opportunity where it was just funny how it worked out, where a friend of mine was actually coaching in the ECHL, which is basically considered like the AA league of pro hockey. And it just so happened that here I am, I go out and I start helping out my friend. And he's working at Dougie Christensen. And he's working as the head coach. And he's like, hey, why don't you come help us out? Because he's a big believer in our process. And I've been working with him for years, and he just loved mindset and he understood the importance of it. And as a former player, he understood the value that it could bring. So I come into the training camp that we had. And as I'm in training camp, I end up talking to another buddy of mine who turns around and says, oh, hey, by the way, did you get this? How did it happen that you're working with the ECHL team? Is that because of their affiliation with Chicago? And so in Chicago, what I've come to find out was another buddy of mine who were working there that we know each other from years back, Marquis, which was hilarious. Oh my God, I didn't even know you're working there. And so we got connected. And through that connection, hey, what are you doing down there? How can I help out? Tell me about the process. And so we just started having discussions about it. And we would talk every 6 to 8 weeks, give an update. Here's what's going on. And then it eventually led to an opportunity with the NHL team where they came in, brought me in for an interview right before COVID, which is pretty wild, right? It's here I go, I come in and have a chat with them, explain to them, here's how I interpret mindset, here's how we're using it, here's the different things that we've done, exercises, tools, things of that nature. And then COVID hits. And so COVID hits, and it was one of those things of, oh, now that COVID hits, what do we do? And where we're really fortunate was, so number one, we've been online for years. So the pivot of when COVID hit and everything ended up happening, we already knew how to play the online game. That's basically what I've been doing now for 6 years at the time, 7 years. So I understood how to pivot instantly and still be able to be useful and helpful for anybody, any organization. We worked with colleges at that time already, teams, things of that nature. And so there was that opportunity where, all right, we're not hiring, right? People were letting go, layoffs were happening. And so I just took a chance and said, hey, you know what, guys, I see right now, I know what to do online. I know how to be able to help out. We started this process and talk. Why don't I just help you guys out right now? Let me pro bono, I'll come on, I'll help you guys out and see what I got, see what we can do and see if it's useful and valuable for the organization. And so took a chance on it. It was a pretty challenging time of being able to manage work wise and all the huge family and everything else going on. And to say, hey, let's put on this workload. But in the end, it was worth it. I spent about 7, 8 months. They saw what I was doing, loved the work. And they're just like, wow, this is good. It's working. They were seeing how their players were evolving and it was really helpful. And so from there, basically, it was like, yeah, hey, I got a call one day. I'm over at the rink hanging out and I get the call and, hey, we're going to give you a 3-year deal. And I just remember saying, holy cow, this is crazy. And the rest, as they say, is history from there.
That's great. Congratulations on that. How would you describe what is the problem someone would have that you and your service is a solution to?
Yeah, the biggest part is knowing how to articulate and understand your process for yourself. That's a big part of what we deal with. And there's a mixture of different things that we do. But really at the core of it is, do you understand in your own mind how to interpret the information, the experience of what you're going through? So in essence, it's basically becoming your own coach, right? Your own advocate, your own leader. It's understanding that, do I know in my own mind how to explain to a coach, to a teammate, most importantly to myself, what am I actually doing? When I'm here and I'm in this process and I'm experiencing whatever it might be, right? As a performer, away from the field, in the boardroom, might be with staff members. When I'm outside, right? I'm in the climate. I'm in the jungle, if we will, when it comes to high performance, right? And that's what we deal with mostly is the high performance individuals that are under a lot of stress, right? Those conditions, those hard conditions. How do I navigate the field in all the different potential variables that I know works for me personally and that I know in my own head how to interpret and navigate in a way that keeps me in a state of mind where I'm not going too high, where I might blow myself up and do something that, hey, this doesn't fly, or where I'm not going too low and I'm not in this place where I don't feel confidence in what I'm doing. So that's the balancing act, right? That we're always providing is this duality to the nature of a high performer or any individual that is working at the highest levels. We're all going through this part of, we always talk about, right, of this idea of so many entrepreneurs have, John, what's the word I'm looking for? With identity. I'm brain farting right now. It's with our identity. It'll come to me in a second, but we don't believe in ourselves, basically. Right? We have
Imposter syndrome. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't help you out there.
Yeah, it's okay. I found it. I knew I was going to find it. I'm like, there it is. But imposter syndrome, right? And I think anybody who's around a lot of people that are high performers, ego, and all those different things, it's normal that we all go through that. It's, am I that good? How valuable am I? All these different components to it. So it's understanding how to manage and play within that. Is truly understanding that in your mind, you know how to interpret the information of what's happening on the outside, and inside being able to say to yourself, I know my capabilities and I know my limits. And so I'm going to keep playing within my capabilities, but I know where my limits are. And it's okay, I'm not going to go down that road yet because I recognize that's not my jam. That's not my lane. That's not what I'm capable of doing. So it's always that balancing act between of checking yourself and learning how you interpret and hear and going through our process to always know, is that real or not? We tell our players all the time, or anyone we work with, is the two biggest things we're always working off of is think like a scientist, think like a lawyer, right? A scientist is look at your history. What does the data tell you personally, right? What have you observed in your life, in your reality that is true to you to this moment, to this day? And then your job from a belief system is to now recognize, all right, how are you putting it out to the world and making a case for yourself beyond a shadow of a doubt that, yep, this is who I am. here's the proof. Here's why I know this is correct. And here's why I know this is the truth. So you're always balancing between the two worlds personally. It's, again, your interpretation of how you're managing that and handling that. And so that's a big part of the work that we do, is to help you really align with your interpretation, your nature, and find this conviction and belief that you just know it to be true based off the evidence that you've just experienced, and based off the belief system that you just know this is your reality and nobody else can tell you otherwise.
Yeah. I think that's one thing, Vince, that I learned from you in a pretty deep way. And I think you help a lot of young athletes and older athletes learn this as well, but also entrepreneurs need to learn it, is sometimes what you think you actually don't know. And you're just touching on it there for a minute, is I think there's a lot of people, and it could fit to the cultural conversation we had before. It could fit to your life. A lot of times people base assumptions and they react on assumptions. They don't actually know. They actually just think they know. Can you talk to me about the impact of that and how you should interpret that just a little bit deeper? How should someone process that so they actually know for sure this is where they are, this is what they should do, or this is what happened, or this is how someone else feels about them, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, great question. And so much of it, right, aligns with the two main concepts I probably think about is acceptance and expectation. When it comes to acceptance, there's a narrative that we all have. And can you accept the fact that there is a narrative of different ideas or different thoughts? That are you aware that in your own mind you don't actually know everything, right? Like, I always laugh at people of when people try to act like the know-it-all and all that stuff. And I go, okay, can you speak Japanese right now? Can you fly a helicopter? Can you cook a 5-course meal, Michelin restaurant, the whole nine? And it's, you go down that rabbit hole, and then it goes, well, no, I can't do that. It's right. And so it's recognizing that I don't know, and releasing to that and accepting to the fact that, okay, in my own interpretation, can I accept the fact that there's a lot I don't know? And do I know how to actually engage with that in the reality that I'm in? Because I recognize it's either useful or not. And what I mean by that is that a lot of times what ends up happening is we get stuck in, again, that imposter syndrome and this feeling of ego. And we feel like I gotta show that I know what I'm talking about. Because if I don't, I'm gonna lose my value. And the reality is, it couldn't be further from the truth, right? Like Brene Brown talks about all the time, of that vulnerability factor, right? Of, it takes a very strong human being to actually say, you know what, I don't actually know that, but that's cool that you know that. And so that acceptance part of first recognizing in yourself, do you have that ability when you're around other high achievers, high performers, to be able to say, you know what, I don't know this, or I don't know that information. I'm willing to go out and learn from you. Oh, that's great that you're giving me that information. Do I accept that fact, right? That I don't know. That's a big part. And then the expectation. Human beings do a really good job of expecting too much from leaders, as an example. We see this all the time. One example is every year, John, you can attest to this, right? Of every year, the coaches at the end of the year, it's in especially youth sport, everybody's selling their next season and how incredible it's going to be. And everybody's recruiting and it's going to be awesome. And then that family hears how awesome it's going to be. And this can be anybody, entrepreneur. You're going to go to a new company and you get to hear all these things of, wow, your company sounds amazing. And so this expectation gets built up of, whoa, this sounds like something new, exciting. This is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. This is going to be a whole different experience that I've ever had. And then you get there, and then the season starts. So you get to the company, and then you see, wow, it's the same stuff everywhere. It's the same old. It's not any different here. It's just the interpretation at the time that I aligned with this idea of expectation took me to such a level, to such an extreme, that it made me believe and convinced me of it's going to be so different. And so that's that fine line between, can you release to, I don't know, right? And accept the fact that there's a lot that you don't know. And then from an expectation standpoint, can you reel it in and realize it's not much different than what you're interpreting? I don't care what anyone sells you and tells you, the same issues are everywhere. Human beings, especially high performing human beings, are the same no matter where you go at any level. So this idea that we go between the acceptance and expectation, it's being mindful of, It's not that much different. So you have to be careful. And what do you understand that you don't know? And if you can just sit there and reflect on it, that starts to build a baseline, right? Because then it becomes engaging with it, recognizing it, feeling, oh, that's an example. That's an example. And the more examples you build up, easier and easier it gets to be like, oh, yeah, there it is right there. I don't know that. Oh, wow. Okay. That brings it down, the ego part, all that stuff. Oh, the expectation. Okay. It's nice. It feels cool, but hold on. I'm going to wait and see. Let's build that trust and make sure. And so it takes time to develop that, but that's the two energies that I'd engage with initially for sure.
Love it. That's great. And Rich, I know Rich is a massive Brene Brown fan, so you just hit him big with the vulnerability talk there.
Yes.
And we actually had a whole podcast breaking down Brene Brown and vulnerability and that conversation. So that certainly is a big piece and something I had to learn. I really had to learn that element of acceptance and vulnerability. And you're right. A lot of times, people in life, whether it be athletes or entrepreneurs or the like, they think this expectation and they have to build this thing all up. Then they get there and, oh, this is what it is. And they're unhappy and it unwinds the other way. So I love it. Vince, you are an entrepreneur that works with athletes. But let me just ask this question. Of all the work you do with athletes, and you could probably say all of it, which is fine, but be more specific than that.
Yes.
What specifically of all of this do you think is really powerful for the entrepreneurial mindset performance? If you had to draw out a couple of elements and go, you know what, here's what I really think entrepreneurs need to focus on as it relates to their mindset performance, what would you say?
Yeah. Awareness of my position is the key to my mobility. All right.
Okay.
So it's a concept that we use, right? Awareness. So it's understanding the one thing I love so much about mindset, as an example, is that where we are today, we could literally create a whole new interpretation based off of getting better or getting worse. And the interpretation we learn a week from now, a month from now, there's a new starting point from that position. So you might think from an athletic lens as an entrepreneur, if you go to the gym, you might know when I do squats, there's a technique that physically, if I hold my body one way, it feels fluid, it feels easy. If I hold my body another way, it feels off, awkward, it feels strange. So as an entrepreneur, you're always looking for what's the starting position? Are you aware of mentally what position am I starting from that's going to give me the most efficient path forward? Right? Do I know how to recognize that? Because we all know as entrepreneurs, you're juggling so many different roles, so many different people, so many different parts to the process that if you don't know the position you're in all those different parts of the process, like how you manage certain staff members, right? How you take care of certain parts of the sales, how you take care of certain parts of your content, all these different factors, right? Of how you manage how you take care of your family and how that impacts you. There's all these different parts that if you're not aware of the position that you take in each different component, that's going to impact your mobility. That's going to impact your efficiency to move forward. And so I think that's a big part as an entrepreneur is that how much can you fill yourself with the capacity to identify as many of those parts of your life, of your starting position? How am I actually beginning? Where am I at now today? Not, again, where I am today is very different than where I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago. So it's always reflecting on your current position and knowing, okay, here's where I am today. Here's what I think about it today. Why do I think that way? Okay, I understand why I'm interpreting it this way now, and I'm aware of that. But I'm always open to changing that interpretation as I move forward. So that awareness factor is a big one of awareness of my position, key to my mobility. Do I know where I am now based off the evidence and the history of what I've lived before? And do I understand why this is the most efficient path forward today? And then I'm ready to change if I need to, but that awareness is massive.
You know what? I've heard awareness of my position is the key to my mobility several times. I'm going to say 100 times from you talking to my kids, from a whole bunch of things. Not once did I ever think, wow, that is something very important for entrepreneurs. I just, in my head, I was thinking, oh, the position that you are on the ice affects your mobility. To me, it's what, and as you said it, I'm like, holy cow, that should have been a quote in my recent book, Vince, because think about it.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
what is your financial position? What's your cash flow position? What's your this position? What's your that? If you don't know, how do you actually make moves in your business? You go and you hire a bunch of sales reps to find out 2 months later you could actually afford them to begin with because you didn't know what your position was. Or you overinvest, you over try and grow your business more than your company can grow because you didn't know what your position was. You weren't able to make the right decisions and move your business forward. So what your current position is, and I can even relate to the employees. What is the state of your current position of your employee health or the perception your employees have of you? That can affect your ability. If you walk into an office and start yelling at everybody and they already saw you as a mad monster, they're going to walk out the door and go, this person doesn't know what they're doing. You got to know what your position is, where you are. Never really thought about it in that vein as an entrepreneur. So that was a pretty good thought.
10 years ago, there's no way I could have explained it like that.
No, but you know what? It's also the key to your growth as a human. Like when you said earlier, I want to come back to it. You said it changed my perspective on life. Mindset performance changed my perspective on life. I have to believe that you in your earlier years were not aware of your position and therefore were flopping all over the place. And then when you figured it out and it changed your life, you started becoming more aware of how you're thinking, how you're digesting, how you're reacting. Things may not be black and white anymore. You didn't have this black and white kind of view. And it started changing your ability to be more mobile and go after what you're looking for. So now, without even asking you that question, that's how I would answer it right now after you just gave that explanation. It was very eloquently done. Is that fair to say? Is that how mindset performance changed your perspective on life?
1,000%. 1,000%. Being able to recognize the big part that took me a long time to realize was we're all social creatures in the way that you can't just, especially from an entrepreneur or particularly leadership, right? Because that's the part that, to me, leadership became at the center hub of mindset performance where I felt this deep responsibility with it, right? As a kid, I'll never forget playing on a junior team at the time, made captain. A couple weeks later, we go into this one of our first games. After the warm up, the team's not prepared. I come in freaking out, losing my mind. A couple weeks later, the coach goes, "You know what? I don't think you're ready for this yet." And it dawned on me at that time when I look back on the history of that and realized at that time I wasn't ready for that. But the thing that I recognized about my life was that I never really liked hey, you're the captain, you're the leader, you're that stuff. And John, like the history of, I never wanted to accept that part of my nature. I didn't like it. I didn't like the responsibility. I just wanted to, let me just be me. Let me be talented and do what I do and not be bothered with how I'm impacting others. But then as time went on, through maturing and being on teams and through the game, that's really the gift that it gave me was the game, seeing that coaching. And then obviously once I had kids, it was like, oh, like it opened up. Wait a second. There's a responsibility that comes with this leadership component. Yep. And so that's what mindset really sharpened for me, is for me to recognize by embracing reality and seeing how people responded and how reacted and being able to actually look back and go, that wasn't correct behavior on my part. I understand why this person reacted the way they did. I understand my role in this and what it played. I understand that their perspective on how they see it may not be the same as mine. And so that idea of leadership, the responsibility, that I finally realized, okay, it's on me. Yep. This isn't something that you can put back on somebody else. Like this, it's not easy. It's hard. But once I understood that, that's how mindset was able to pull it all together and literally shift my life, because I'm always, right? Always evolving, always seeing how to improve, how to be better. This doesn't work. It's one of those things that once you see how it actually helps you in the day-to-day world of high performance, there's nothing else that I've seen more efficient to keep you from blowing yourself up, because there's so much pressure in what we're doing that if you don't have a strategic way of aligning that and categorizing and just knowing things are what they are and accepting them for what they are, but knowing how to see them for what they are in your own, again, interpretation, I don't know how you're able to do as much as we do as entrepreneurs. I don't know how it's possible without being able to actually look at it and go, okay, this is where this is, this is where I am now. Okay, cool. And being able to just accept that, right? And realize.
Well said.
Yeah, and that's
said. Vince, how can people get more? Obviously you work with athletes. We understand that. But if you want to learn more, I think really even connect on your social platform to really just get more of your content. Where should they go?
Yeah, easiest one now is on Instagram at Coach Vinny Malts. Coach Vinny, Vinny Malts. I'm on there mostly. And then as time goes on, I'm going to start to get into these other channels and whatnot, John, some of the background of what's going on there. But
Yep.
for now, easiest way is find there, and then we'll be putting out information of where else to find us.
Awesome. Vince, thanks for your time today. This was awesome.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Vince.
Yeah, thank you so much, guys. It was great.
Please stick around for a few more minutes while Rich and I break down this episode. So, Rich, when you heard awareness of your position is the key to your mobility, when you first heard it, did you connect to the meaning to which he then described in the way that I did? Because I had heard it so many times before, but I didn't really connect to that meaning towards entrepreneurs in the way that I did in this session.
Funny enough, not being a hockey player, I connected to that makes sense in hockey. And I connected to Paige, our 10-year-old. That makes sense in soccer. I didn't, and I was struggling to figure out where's the overlay over to being an entrepreneur, and how's that relevant? I think it'd be worth you recapping.
Yeah. I think at the end of the day, Vince, Rich, a lot of entrepreneurs think they know where they are in the state of their business, or they think they know how the employees feel about them and their business, or they think they know how things are going with their top customer, or they think they know how things are going operationally on the warehouse floor. They think. And until you actually know specifically with data, with proven information that this is what is going on, how do you make decisions? How do you make decisions and be mobile in how you're going to operate your business towards your plans and your growth if you just don't know? So being aware of exactly where you're at, exactly what your position is in all these different elements of your business will be the key to you being so mobile to growing your company. And I had never really connected it like that. Maybe I did the same thing you did. I was just trying to put it in different elements. But
Yeah.
most of the business decisions I made in my career that turned out to not work so well for me, I probably wasn't fully aware of my position.
Yeah, I see the brilliance in that again. I liked the looking at the mindset method from a recipe standpoint. Uh,
Mhm.
I get that, and an aha moment for me in that we didn't talk a lot about it, but I loved it, and I have a note on it. Is look at it in combinations. I think it's really easy to isolate something and say, that's my thing. Or if we're coaching someone, to say, that's their thing. Here's what they like, or here's what I like. And everything in combinations, everything is situational also. Trying to read the environment on what's going to bring out the best mindset for an individual. And it's going to be a combination of things that works for them, not a single thing.
Yeah. To me, that's the other thing too that you asked a really good question about. And he said, look, there's a big difference between mental performance and mindset performance. And my articulation of that is mental performance, or what are the tools and things you do to prepare your mind, prepare mentally, right? Visualization techniques, yoga, breathing, a whole bunch of other things you could do to prepare your mind. But the reality is, you then get into life and something happens, a circumstance happens. It's factual. It happens. It rains today. It's factual. Whatever happens, right? It's factual. And then you have thoughts about it. Whatever happens in your life, you have a thought. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be whatever. And then you have feelings about it. But then you have to take an action based on those feelings. And what Vince was articulating was, in his younger years, he would have this thing happen to him and he'd explode. He couldn't figure out, you don't see things my way, I'm out of here, or whatever it may be, and led to conflicts in his life. Whereas today he has that same feeling and he'd react differently because he knows the recipe, he knows what's going on in his mind, and he knows how to counter that with maybe the positive action, which will lead to the positive result. How you react from feelings and the actions you take from your feelings can either drive you downwards or drive you upwards, depending on how you react. And depending on how you react and what actions you take can lead to either a positive result or a negative result ultimately. So to me, that's really about mindset performance. How do you optimize your results, right? And I even look at it as like in health. You can optimize your health by just taking a look at what stuff you put in your body actually makes you feel versus powerful. I think it's the same thing with the mind.
I think the key to that is a pause, putting a separation between stimulus and response. The godfather, if you will, of that is Viktor Frankl in the book Man's Search for Meaning, where he was in a Nazi concentration camp and they would do terrible things to him. And he would take on the mindset of, you could do anything you want. You could whip me, you can starve me, but you can't control my reaction. I own my reaction. So in that was the brilliance. And I think he's the godfather of it, I say, because that's where this whole idea of gaining control of our responses really originated, and putting a pause between stimulus and response. I'm reminded of this also with somebody who I work with, who I noticed had a conversation, and the person, it looked like non-verbally they may not fully have bought into whatever it is we were talking. I don't even remember what we were talking about. And I said, would you mind sharing what you're feeling? Because I'm noticing how you're looking about it. And the person ended up sharing what they were feeling, and then ended up later having conflict with me. And it was very appropriate. And the person said, Rich, I'm working really hard on controlling my reactions. And I would really appreciate if I was more judged on my response than my reaction. And if you notice I'm having a reaction, but my response is not necessarily in alignment with the nonverbal reaction you're seeing, know that's on purpose. Know that I am trying to control what my reaction is. And I was like, oh, wow. I always looked at it as, it's insightful to draw that out of someone. Hey, I noticed you were feeling a certain way. I'm partnering with you. I want to hear what you have to say. And this was a time when this person reminded me that sometimes that's just invasive. And we need to work with people on the reaction we're getting, and not always call out when the response they have may not be favorable.
And that's a really good example of that person being very aware of their position.
Yeah.
So love the example there for this one, because I really believe that the more we are aware of our position, the more mobile we can be. So I really love that. That's going to be a big takeaway for me with entrepreneurs as I work with them going forward.